So after talking about making this video for quite some time, I'm finally sitting down to share my favorite books of all time. And when I say all time, I was reading in, I think, 2015, 2016, and I stopped around 2018. And I picked up reading again last year, 2023, and I've been reading last year and this year. So, you know, two different spans of life we're going to talk about, but these are still some of my favorite books. There's 10 here, and I wanted to share them all with you. Let me start out by saying that several of these books that I'm going to mention are not mentioned on any social media. And I don't know if it's because they're older books or what, but you need to read them. Like, put them on your TBR right now. And the first one is a book that has still stuck with me to this day. If you were to ask me what is my favorite animal right now, I'm going to say an elephant. And that is because I read this book. The amount of research, Leaving Time by Jodi Picoult, the amount of research that this author has to do for a book is just mind-blowing to me. And I have said it and I will continue to say it. This story is about a daughter who sets out on this journey to find her mother that abandoned her at the age of 3. But a story of elephants is woven into this book. I did not know anything about elephants until reading this, and now I know so much more. I want to reread this. She shares with you how they communicate, their mannerisms, how they act as a group. It's just, read this book. I stood in the bathtub after reading this and sobbed. It touched me so much. So Leaving Time by Jodi Picoult is still one of my all-time favorites. I still think about this book all the time. My second favorite book of all time is another one that is not talked about on social media, and I don't know if it's because it's an older book. When did this book come out? Oh, this book came out in 2009. I guess that's why, because that's a long time ago. So I'm glad I'm mentioning it. So I read this book back in 2016, I think, and it has stuck with me until this day. And I'm sure long after this day. And it is a book that has made me question everything about myself and the way that I acted growing up and my personality and all of that. And it is What Alice Forgot by Liane Moriarty. This book is about Alice, and she has gone to the gym, and she falls and gets amnesia. And it is about her learning the person she was before amnesia, and if that's the person she wants to be after recovery. This just made me question my entire personality. So I highly recommend this. This is almost 500 pages, but if I'm mentioning it as a favorite, that tells you something. Because normally if there's a book that's 500 pages or almost 500 pages, I'm not going to read it. But I cannot recommend this one enough. And it says it's a motion picture, but let me tell you. Normally, there may have been 1 or 2 times I am going to mention that book next that I have watched the movie and liked it. A lot of times I don't want to watch the movie or watch the TV show because I love the book so much I think that it's going to take away from the book. Are you like that? Like Colleen Hoover's It Ends With Us is fixing to be on the big screen, and I just really don't know if I'm going to watch it because I don't want it to take away from the book. Are you like that? I might be an odd one on that. But that is my second favorite of all time, What Alice Forgot. The next book I'm going to talk about is actually a book that I have watched the movie, and I actually enjoyed the movie as much as the book. But I read the book first. So I recommend reading the book and then watching the movie, but have your tissue. And that is The Shack by W.M. Paul Young. And I know this is an older book. Like very old. When was this book put out? 2007. But, y'all, this is about, I don't even know what his name is. Mackenzie. Is that it? Mackenzie, I think that's his name, takes his kids on this little camping trip, and one of them comes missing. And they call him, and in the book, his name is Mackenzie, but they call him Mac. It says Mac receives a suspicious note, apparently from God, inviting him back to the shack for a weekend. So, and y'all, you can say this is a God-centered book. I mean, I guess it would be, but it's not, I wouldn't call this a religious book, if that makes sense. It's just a good one. I loved it. Loved it. And highly recommend it to anybody. And I want to say the movie was on Netflix, I think. But the actors did such a good job in the movie, and I recommend the movie as well. My fourth favorite book is another long one. It is, once again, almost 500 pages. So if I'm mentioning it as one of my all-time favorites, I recommend reading it. Y'all, a good book to me is like 200-300 pages. 350 is kind of where I'm like, okay, that's good. But if it's 400 plus pages, I have to really want to read the book. I read this back in 2016 or 2017, and it's still with me to this day. And that is Kate Morton's The Secret Keeper. I don't see her mentioned much at all on social media, and I'm not really sure why. She's an amazing author, and this says, I'm going to read the back because it's been quite a while since I have read this book, so I want to make sure that I give you the good details. It says, during a picnic at her family's farm in the English countryside, 16-year-old Laurel Nicholson witnesses a shocking crime, a crime that challenges everything she knows about her adored mother Dorothy. Now, 50 years later, Laurel and her sisters are meeting at the farm to celebrate Dorothy's 90th birthday. Realizing that this is her last chance to discover the truth about that long ago day, Laurel searches for answers that can only be found in Dorothy's past. Clue by clue, she traces a secret history of three strangers from vastly different worlds thrown together in a war-torn London: Dorothy, Vivian, and Jimmy, whose lives are forever after intertwined. A gripping story about deception and passion, The Secret Keeper will keep you enthralled to the last page. I don't usually read historical fiction books, but this one got me. I loved it. I still think about it to this day. And I've read several books by Kate Morton, but this is the one that sticks with me the most. I had The Lake House, Winter Garden, or The Forgotten Garden, and then this one, and I truly love this one. So my fourth favorite is The Secret Keeper. My fifth favorite, and this is the last one from several years ago, kind of when I read in 2015 to 2018. This book, if you do not know, I'm a huge Up fan. I love Up. I love The Notebook, the movie, the book not so much, but this kind of goes into that universe or that area for me. That's why I loved it so much. So the main character in this book reminds me of Carl from Up, and it is Friedrich. I don't know how, I need to look up how he pronounces his name so I quit pronouncing it wrong. Bachman, a man called Ove. See, it says Ove. Like in the United States, we pronounce this Ove, but I have seen people get butchered on social media for pronouncing it wrong. Ove, however you pronounce it. I don't know how to pronounce it, so that's it, O-V-E. This book, I did not think I was going to like this book as much as I did. This is a Grumpy Sunshine type of book. So this is about a man called Ove, who's he's an older man. He comes across as very bitter, very grumpy. Then he gets these new neighbors, these kids that kind of befriend him. So this book is about kind of their friendship and how it grows, and I just cannot recommend this book enough. I loved it. And this is not a book that I normally like to read, but y'all, I just really liked it. It is such a heartfelt book. Now we're to my most current reads, and we're going to start with number 6 as being my reread from back in those times till today. You probably already know if you watched my 10 favorite books so far for 2024, I mentioned this book. If you've not seen that, I will link that in a card above, and that is Jodi Picoult's Small Great Things. Once again, I can't believe that all of my favorite books are long. Like, this is almost 500 pages. And y'all, I'm not a person that reads a 500-page book. But all of my favorites are long, so I apologize for that. So that should tell you that if they're that long and I loved them, they're worth reading. This book, So hard to read. I've said this several times. I read this back in 2015, 2016. When did this book come out? 2016. So I probably either read it 2016 or 2017. And it's so hard to read. I read it back in 2016, 2017. I saw some people mentioning it on TikTok. And I thought, I have that book on my shelf and I don't remember anything about the book. So I pulled it off my shelf and I read the synopsis and I'm like, not ringing the bell. So I decided in May to reread it, and I'm so glad I did because now it's going to stick with me. This book is one that's hard to read, but I think it's necessary to read. It deals with racism. You get three sides of racism: the racist, the person being affected, and someone on the outside. And the language in this book is very hard to read. Many times I wanted to shut the book and put it down because I felt uncomfortable, but you guys, I'm so glad that I pushed through. I loved it. I think it's something we all need to read. So Small Great Things by Jodi Picoult is book number 6. My 7th favorite book of all times is one that I want to say a lot of people have as one of their favorites, and it is Love in Other Words by Kristin Morgan. Let's talk about second chance romance. If you were to say to me, recommend a book, your favorite second chance romance book, this is it. I loved everything about it. It's not like, it has some graphic scenes, but it's not smutty. Like, it's so well done. I cannot recommend this book enough. If you're wanting a romance type of book, start here. Well, maybe not start there, because if you start here, where do you go from after reading this one? So I want to say everybody on social media thinks this book is amazing, or most people. I know there's going to be some that don't think that, but just read it. If you want a romance, just read this. It is so heartfelt. I loved every minute of it, and I want to reread it. Let me mention before I move to my 8th favorite, none of these are in order. I just grabbed them and I'm sharing them. So all of these, they're just really not numbered. So the next one I want to talk about is my first Nicholas Sparks book, and I've tried to read 2 others since this that just do not compare, and I had to DNF one of them. And that is The Wish. Another, I guess I like heartfelt books because this one was a tearjerker, but it was so endearing. I loved it. And it's like, if there was one book that I could say an author took stories and by the end wrapped them all up into a bow, this would be the book. I loved everything about it. I loved the characters. I loved the storyline. This does, if you do not like to read about illness, this might not be the book for you, but I loved it. So Nicholas Sparks, The Wish, read it. And I know this is a book people either love it or they hate it. I'm on the love it side. This is a must read for me. So my 9th favorite book is a book by Abby Jimenez. And you probably know which one I'm going to mention, and that is yours truly. So you might wonder, why did you choose this book above the other 2? So I've also read Part of Your World and Just for the Summer, and this one is by far my favorite of the 3. Now, I do plan on getting The Friend Zone. Have you read that? Let me know what your thoughts are about that. I'm going to get that series, I think, next and read those. The way that she weaves anxiety through this whole story just really touched me. I'm a person that has dealt with anxiety forever, I guess. And since I've started perimenopause, it's been even worse. I love the way that she made anxiety a positive and not a negative. Because every day that I deal with anxiety, I feel like it's such a negative in my life. But it just gave me such happiness to see that she was able to shed a positive light on anxiety. And let me tell you, and Jacob, which is a doctor, he is the one that deals with the anxiety in this book. So it's a male dealing with the anxiety. Normally, I feel like that we see a female character talked about, like on social media and all that. Normally, I have only seen females talking about anxiety. So that's a whole nother element too. To see a male highlighted as being the one with anxiety is just something I don't think I've seen very much at if at all. And let me tell you, the characters in this book, I loved every single character. Jacob's parents, his mother, I think, is a sex therapist, and it just adds a whole nother comical relief to the story. I loved it. Loved everything about it. So if you've not read this, I highly recommend it. And then last but not least is the one that I do not have, that I let somebody borrow from work, and it is The Women by Kristin Hannah. Now, I know a lot of people say The Nightingale is their favorite by her. I like The Nightingale, but I feel like with that one, some of it could have been condensed down. I think I would have loved it so much more if it wouldn't have been so long, if that makes sense. And Kate read it, my daughter, she read it for AR for 9th grade, and she felt the same way. And I did not share my thoughts with her before she read it, and she thought the same thing. She thought it was a little bit too long. So I feel like I would have connected with the story if it wasn't as long. It might be one that I need to go back and reread as well. But The Women, it was almost 500 pages. And I could have taken probably 500 more pages. At the end of that book, when I finished, I sat an entire weekend and did nothing but read that book. I felt like I was in, what do they call that? A reading slump, or like you can't pick up another book. Nothing was going to compare to that book after reading it. I don't normally read historical fiction books, and I read that one, and I didn't know anything about the Vietnam War. Wars have not ever been anything. I struggle with dates and names, so it's always intimidating to me to read a historical fiction book. But another book where it's just, by the end, you just feel like the story was complete. The way that Kristin Hannah was able to talk about women in the Vietnam War and then the PTSD after the war was just, I learned so much reading that book. So the amount of research that she had to do for that book is just mind-blowing to me. And evidently in the Vietnam War, people did not say that women were in the war. And I did not know this. Like, it was a common thing that society did not think women participated in the war, and they did. So highly recommend reading that. So let's just, as a summary, go through and share all the books again. So The Women, which I do not have. We have Yours Truly. We have The Wish. Love in Other Words. Small Great Things. I was trying to do it sideways. A Man Called Ove. The Secret Keeper. The Shack. What Alice Forgot. And Leaving Time. So I want to hear in the comments below some of your favorite all-time books. I'm always trying to add books to my TBR card over here. So share all of your favorites in the comments below. And like we've been doing for the last couple of videos, let's share a word. So today's word of the day is going to be read. So in the comments, just type read, and I know that you watched to the very end. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you give it a big thumbs up. By giving my videos a thumbs up, it shows YouTube you're engaged and you like my content, which means they'll start suggesting it and recommending it to more people, which means our community will grow and will continue to spread positivity. And you guys, it means a whole lot to comment the word read, to give the video a thumbs up, because it helps with the YouTube algorithm. So you guys, that is all, and until next time. Bye, you guys.